Hello, sisters, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel, and it's time to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy my conversation with Jeni Dehn as she shares about her first solo travel adventure, going to a retreat overseas, including renting a car in a foreign country and driving stick shift to an unknown destination. Tune in.
Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean Go Solo Live? Have you ever been asked, why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
And today I'd like to welcome Jeni Dehn to the show, sharing her solo travel stories. Welcome, Jeni.
Welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm happy to have you here. And I know you're out on the West Coast right now, and I'm in the Midwest. And I love that we have the ability and technology to bridge, so many miles just by picking up our phone or getting on the computer.
I think that's the beautiful thing about technology is we can connect anywhere in the world. It's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. So we're going to jump right into it. And I would love to hear, how did the desire for solo travel first come to you? Some people are accidental solo travelers whose friend cancels on them at the last minute. Some people know that the only way they want to travel is solo. How did it happen for you?
So I'm in my 40s. I turned 45 here in October. And I got married, I guess, 2.5 years ago. And amazing husband. I've got 2 now bonus children that I adore and love. And I'm also a full-time practitioner. So what I was noticing in my life is I was giving a lot. And what I started to sense is a little bit of like, I'm done. Just time out. And so I knew I wanted to be in what I call a healing circle. And I knew I wanted to be in a space that I had never gone. And so I started to feel this urge, and I was like, I'm going to go by myself. And what was amazing about it is, of course, my family, my husband, they were so supportive of that. They're like, go do what you need to do. And so it came from a place of actually wanting to take care of me.
Love it.
Yeah.
So, and you were supported in it. So again, one of the reasons why we started this podcast was because the comments that we get so often is, why would you want to do that? That's so weird. And that comes from people close to us as well as strangers. So how did that feel as you were getting all that support, to go and really go do and be in that space for yourself? To
me, I think it's the essence of freedom. Like, we can fully be who we are when we have the freedom to do that. And so that's where that comes from for me. And that's actually an agreement in my relationship with my husband is be who you are. And I support you in being who you are. And it was interesting because there was one of the workshops that I wanted to do, it was being held in Mount Shasta, California as well, just in a different month. But when I felt into me, there was a pull to go foreign. There was a pull to go far away, out of the familiar. And I think getting out of the familiar is where you really get into contact with yourself.
Absolutely. So where did you go? And I actually have a lot of people who are thinking about the retreats, and they're starting to be, somewhat hesitant on it. Even if they're going to meet up with people, there is still a solid solo experience happening there. And I want to talk about the value of that. So where did you go, and tell me more?
I went to Ibiza, Spain.
Awesome.
So I went halfway around the world and put myself on an island. And part of the reason I wanted to go is I wanted to go where I didn't know anybody. I truly wanted to go where I didn't know anybody. And yet I also knew that the likelihood of most speaking English was there as well. So I wasn't totally out of a comfort zone, but yet I was. And so the workshop that I took was in Ibiza, Spain. And I want to share this moment in the workshop. It was one of the first stays in the first circle. And I had made this agreement. I want to go where I know nobody, and nobody knows who I am.
Why?
Because of the work that I do, I didn't want to have to tend to another or track another. I really didn't. I wanted to fully give to myself and to be in that container for me, solo me.
Well, I want people to hear that this is an important why. And it's that but our very nature of women is often that we do tend to someone else, whether they want or expect us to or not. It's just our nature to give or let go of some of the things that we want or need or expect and honor others.
Yep.
And so you got that and you knew better.
Yeah. That's exactly what it was. It was like, I don't want to track another. I don't want to care for another. I don't want to be concerned about how one perceives me, or how, if somebody knows me or has a frame of reference for me, that they put me in that container and they're like, well, she can't do this. That's not who she is. And I didn't want any of it. Okay. I was like, no, I'm going to show up.
Thank you. And so this is why I tell women, especially at times where they need to take that time for themselves, is yes, you might have a grand time traveling with your sister, your daughter, your best friend, your mother, whatever. You may have a grand time. But if you're going for personal growth, the people that I've just listed often have a vested interest in you. And when they hear about personal growth, they have a different lens that they're using. And that lens it always will also reflect their own fears. And so if you're looking to change, your change could have impact on their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they can only support you to a certain degree.
Yes, yes. And to give yourself the freedom to not track how the other perceives you, so that.
Yes.
That it's so big. It's like, I don't want to track any of that.
Well, and it's an opportunity. One of the things that I truly love about solo travel is when you go into that retreat, for whatever reason you're going there, it gives you the chance to put on a particular persona if you want to. You can shed this is who I am to the public. This is my job. This is my role in life as a spouse or a mom, or, you can create that story. And there's a lot of people who need a chance to practice that story in a safe way.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it was a lot of like, I want to let down the story. I don't even want to put energy in holding that story of even how I perceive myself. Who's going to come forward in this container without having to tend to another?
I think this is super important. And I'm really taking that moment. I want people to take a moment and really listen. Part of what Jeni was doing was letting go of the story and just being really present. And by going to a place that is farther away, you are able to shed some of that more. Now,
mm-hmm.
what type of retreat were you going on?
It was actually a breath work retreat. So I knew there would be healing, and I didn't know in what shape or form it would come in. Although I love doing my personal growth work, I also love my personal growth work to be something I can continue and hand down to my clientele base as well. So although I was hip deep in my own growth, I also learned skills and techniques to bring forward. And one of the things that I loved, I think it was day one in the opening circle, and there was a group of 15 women. And, you share. On day one, you always share who you are, why you're here, that type of thing, that opening sharing. And I remember as it was going around the circle, there wasn't much depth coming forward. No judgment, just not a lot of depth coming forward. Okay. It was felt very surface. And I could feel this energy rising in me. And I actually, when it got to my turn, I sat there and I was like, okay, do I conform to what 13 other people just said? Or do I honor why I traveled this far? And I felt, and I said, And I opened my who I am is like, I traveled halfway around this circle to not filter. And so here I go. And I mean, the floodgates opened, the rawness came out, and I shared from that place. And I remember the facilitator going, thank you for opening the circle.
Yes.
Because I didn't want to filter. Like, I get that I don't know any of you here, and that's why I'm not going to filter anything, because I'm not concerned about approval or acceptance or any of that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So, and actually, I mean, if I were the leader, I would very much appreciate, that you had taken that risk and had opened the circle in that manner. Yeah. Now, was that something that really allowed a little bit of a shift in the dynamic in there as well?
It did. Like, the next person who shared, she was already in tears, and she went into the depth of why she was there versus just that top layer.
Well, and that allows people to make progress a lot more quickly too. Now, for some, that might be a little bit too much too soon, and that's okay.
It's okay.
But if you're ready, and a lot of people, when they're going to that stuff, they're there because they're ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we don't want to spend more time waiting if we don't have to.
No. And that was why that was my intent behind going alone.
Yep.
Behind putting myself in a foreign environment,
yep.
Behind being very intentional about not knowing anyone, is because of that. And so now I've put myself in the place. Now I need to honor why I put myself there.
Yep. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Okay. So please, I want to open it up for you to be able to share what were the key takeaways for you, not necessarily just from the retreat itself, which probably had a lot of beautiful growth, but from that experience of being immersed in an experience and alone and giving yourself the space that you needed.
There was a lot. Like, I think just getting through an airport in a foreign country, it's so entertaining. And that's the piece that you're out of your creature comforts. You are out of your norm. Just the basic symbology around how things are marked and what they mean throws you into a state of disorientation. I mean, so I got out of the airport. I made it through the airport, got to the rent-a-car, because I was driving in a foreign country. And I was like, I can't believe I'm going to do this.
You were driving? That's impressive.
So I'm renting the car, and I'm just still trying to get out of the airport, right? So stick shift. I learned how to drive on a stick shift, but haven't driven a stick shift in probably 10 years.
Yep.
So it's a lot like riding a bike, yet you're a little rusty.
Well, plus, weren't you driving on the wrong side of the road?
No, you're not there. Okay. Fortunately.
Wow.
So this is the piece. I remember being in the airport and trying to get out of the airport and going around the little circles. And there was someone behind me. And oh my gosh, Jennifer, I panicked because I'm like, wait, I'm trying to get out of here. I'm fully disoriented. How's this car work? And so I actually turned a corner a little too sharp, and I could hear some of the undercarriage of the car scrape the curb. Wow. And I just hit the brakes and I stopped. Someone's still behind me. And I was like, stop. You're okay. You're okay. Take a breath. You know how to drive. And I just needed to slow down for a moment because everything's different. So you can't help but be in a state of disorientation. But I had to just pause for a moment. And the people behind me just needed to wait.
You're absolutely right. And, I always laugh when people are in such a hurry in a car because I'm like, you're in a car, right? Like, you're going to get there pretty darn fast. So why don't you just, take a moment? And so giving yourself, even in that foreign land, that moment to just take that deep breath, it's important because otherwise you keep working things up and nothing's going to get solved.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it was right at the pivotal piece of that moment. Like I can feel hustled and pushed and I can add to that feeling of disorientation, or I can just pause for a moment and put myself back in my body, so to speak, and just go, okay, now I'll move.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
giving yourself a moment to either reset or pause or something like that. But it's important. And again, it's one of those things that some people are just like, I got stuff to do. We got to keep clicking.
Yeah.
We got to keep moving. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Breathe.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So you have now started to get oriented to your new surroundings. And what's showing up like? Because again, okay, so you're now comfortable in your car. You're a little bit more comfortable on the road. And then you have to get to the destination. And then you have to like get out and go in.
Yeah, it's, and I was staying at a, I don't even know what you call it over there, but it was a kind of an Airbnb. I was staying with somebody through the recommendations of the facilitators. And so even that, just coming into somebody's home, being welcomed, but yet you're unfamiliar. Where's your place? Where isn't your place? And giving yourself permission to settle or rest in that. So there was a piece that was, all of it was unfamiliar and it was new. I was greeting a lot of these things that were new for the first time.
How'd that feel?
It's both. It's that feeling of kind of exhilaration, excitement, and it's also fear, like it all dances together. And yet when you do that, and you put yourself there, you recognize in this moment that it's just because it's new and it's unfamiliar, it's nothing to really fear, because every turn I went, I was welcomed.
But I love that you talk about the dance. That's just the same thing of, if you're going to have joy, you're likely going to have pain and disappointment. And so just the same thing is happening when we're traveling, is this adrenaline and excitement and anticipation, and then the fear and the anxiety and the trepidation. They're married together. And if you're only going down the path where you have no fear, you're missing out on a lot.
A lot. I mean, because essentially it's stretching you. It's expanding you and your awareness, and the stories we make up around all the things that could go wrong are quite entertaining. And then when you put yourself there and you recognize, like, wow, that wasn't half as okay. Like it's so interesting to watch that mechanism at play, and then to put yourself in it, and it doesn't even come close to the story that you made up about it.
Absolutely. And I will also say that's one of the reasons why I don't love sharing with a lot of people my travel plans either. Because they often will have their own lens that they look through to determine whether they think it's a good idea if I make that trip. And it's like, I'm going to just come in with my own baggage and my own fear. You don't need to really add anything more to that. I don't want to carry any others. Right? And so there's
so true
validation. And again, it sounds like, at home for you, even though this was a little bit like out of your comfort zone, those at home were very supportive of it.
They were. It is interesting though, like, my husband, super supportive, and friends, but it is interesting, just, your friends, your acquaintances, business acquaintances, people that you meet, there's almost a stigma too. They're like, your husband's not going? And I'm like, no. And I even heard a few times, he let you? And I was like, wow, fascinating. I was like, this is really interesting. Because there are old stereotypes or stigmas around that.
Yep. And when's the last time like somebody let you do something that you decided that you wanted to do?
I know. I mean, we had a good chuckle out of it, but they're like, he let you? I'm like, I don't know that was ever in the scenario.
Well, and then you have, how old were your inherited kids at that time as well?
They are, they're 6 and 8, sorry. I'm drawing a blank. 6 and 10.
Okay. So
Yeah.
there's also, was there mom guilt involved as well?
Not so much.
Okay.
There really wasn't, because they have a beautiful mother that tends to them and takes care of them. And when we have them, my husband is an incredible father. So I knew Olivia, our 10-year-old, would be, where is she and when is she coming home? And my husband heard that often, like, well, where is she and when is she coming home? Which is a legit question when you're 10. So, yeah, it wasn't that. It was just more of, people were amazed that you go by yourself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, yeah, but that's where the most profound growth happens, by yourself, because there's a layer of safety and comfort when you travel with another.
Absolutely. And an ability to not be fully responsible, like not fully responsible for your own growth. You now have an excuse kind of of, well, I was only able to do so much because I didn't want to offend, step on toes. We needed to balance whatever that was. So there's a lot of responsibility to yourself when you're solo traveling as well, to make it what you intend it to be.
Yeah.
So what were your biggest growth lessons in and feel free to talk about the retreat itself, if that makes sense, because I'm sure that's an integrated part of this.
I've had this experience before, and anytime that I travel somewhere out of the USA, I think it's an opportunity to expand your awareness. One of my biggest teachings, it had to do with the retreat, but it didn't have to do with the retreat. It had to do with the culture. And it was this really beautiful experience. And for the first few days, I was just trying to figure out what I was witnessing and what I was observing and what I was feeling as well. And then it started to show itself. And I've done talks around feminine and masculine energy, and in Ibiza, Spain in particular, because that's only what I have reference to, there was this beautiful feminine energy. And what took me a little bit to see or become aware of, it was the purity of the feminine, the purity. It was soft, it was vibrant, it was expressive, it was sensual, it was honored, it was respected, it was free. And I remember just watching this piece in the culture, in the women, in the men, and going, I don't know that I've ever seen this in the U.S. I got to be really honest about that. I don't know that I've ever seen it there. So I've been working on my own growth around the feminine energy for 10 plus years. And so to be able to sit back and go, what is this?
Neat.
And that was something I didn't even have frame of reference. That was never even in my thought of what I would be gifted in this excursion. Never even thought of that. And yet this was one of the biggest experiences I got to witness and embody. And I was like, wow, powerful.
It's pretty great.
There's something about just going, I've done some other travel, and they weren't solo travels, but they were travels into other countries. And one was Egypt, one was Peru. And we have, I guess one of my takeaways from that is how little one can have, and how joyous and happy and fulfilled their lives are. And that has been one of my biggest learnings and teachings, and it's changed me in ways that I can't even express. Because I think when you see that and you experience that, then how you step back into your world, and although you're coming home, and I live in the U.S. and I have all these creature comforts and more than I could possibly ever need, it changes you.
It does. It does if you are open to it and you let it. And that's partly why solo travel is important, because each person is bringing their own lens to those situations, their own amazing experiences from their past as well as their traumas.
Yeah.
And so in my last episode, one of the women was saying, when you can be a photographer and look at the same thing, but see it entirely differently. The same thing that happens when we travel and we have that experience with the culture, we have that experience with the space that we're in. And yet, because of where we're coming from, we may experience it very differently. And because of what we may or may not be open to and digging personally and those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, we sometimes are giving a perception or an image of a culture or the people of that culture that is very false.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're face to face with people and you show up from that authentic place and you're open to it, I've not traveled somewhere where that image has ever been correct. The people that I have met and have had experience with are so authentic and so helping and so welcoming that it gets to crumble a lot of those illusions that have been created.
For sure. So, okay, so let me talk about then as you're going through those illusions and things like that. What did that change for you? So you had the experience, you had the feelings, the enlightenment, and as you're coming home from that experience, what was different for you?
It was interesting because being halfway around the world, you're 9 or 10 hours apart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just the ability to communicate with my husband, we recognized within the first 3 days, like, this isn't going to work because you're at different resonance. You're at a different space when you're communicating. He's waking up and I'm going to bed.
Yep.
Or I'm going to bed and he's waking up. And so giving ourselves that freedom after the first few days to just not communicate, right? And just, it was kind of a good morning text or a good night text, but that was it. And so I'm coming home actually haven't communicated with my husband in more than a week. And also knowing that I'm going to integrate a lot of what came forward there. And what I noticed, especially in the piece with the around the feminine teaching and that energy, is in my dress, in my clothing choices, I started feeling this I want to bring color back in. I want to, there's a flow of the fabric that I want to start bringing back in. And now what's still appropriate for me in Seattle, Washington, and this environment is going to be completely different than Ibiza, Spain, right? Because it's different. Yet I had, there was a state of reflection of, I had started my days that I worked, I put on my black sweats and my black shirt and my black scarf because I see clients, so I work in my sweats. But I noticed how it became very dark and gray. And I was like, wait, this needs to shift, because how do I express more of this authentic energy of who I am? And how, in the simple thing of bringing color back in, or a little more flow, still be warm, still wear scarves because it's cool and damp here sometimes, right? But I definitely noticed that change very significantly. Clients even commented, oh, you got a lot more color on today. I do.
Wow.
Yeah. And I shared with them, I'm like, that's some of the Ibiza medicine coming forward,
I agree. But that's a really good, it's almost like a good manifestation of,
Yeah.
And it's something that's visible that people can see. And I think that's an indicator of, there's going to be some changes. You're going to see this outward change, but there were some inner changes as well.
Yeah. I think there's a more openness.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I was close, but you can notice a more openness of just wanting, like, to assist or help someone when you see that they're disoriented. Because I want, like, this piece of, like, what, are you lost? Do you need some help? What can you need? What can I help you with? Like,
Yep.
it's more, you're more prone to noticing when you just came out of that experience, you know? So it feels like sometimes the blinders get widened and you can see more. And then there was just allowing yourself to settle back in. But when you go through those changes, whatever they are on whatever level, I can't, some do, I can't come home and be the same.
Absolutely. Well, and it's interesting because I will also say that I come home changed, but I feel like when I come home changed, I feel like it's, let's say, a 60-degree change, right? But then you're back in the normal. You're back in your same space. So by the time that I'm done, there's like a diminished return to the travel, which is why we have this need to keep doing it again and again, because we like that point of change, but we come back to a version of reality. And so I'm like, okay, I might have gone and gotten a 60-degree change to bring back, but in reality, I'm maybe putting in like a 10 to 20-degree change that stays.
I agree with that. And I would actually align like solo travel a lot with spiritual work, because when we go through a spiritual experience, we have this huge change or vibrational shift. And the truth is, you can't maintain that because you stretched, you went. So it's going to come back down. You still changed, you still shifted, but it is like 10 to 20%. Then you integrate that 10 to 20%, and then you need to do it again to stretch. And so for me, that is very much in alignment with the spiritual journey in and of itself. I think that's why we travel solo, is to be expanded, to be pushed, to be uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And in that expansion, it has to come back a little because you can't maintain it because you're not in that environment all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how long ago was this trip?
This was in June of this year.
So recent.
Yes. So not that long ago. And yet it's interesting. I was just talking to a girlfriend, how far away it feels, that piece already.
Yes.
But observing the piece that has shifted and that piece has still maintained. And that's I think the shift of how I'm presenting and bringing myself forward.
Absolutely. And again, I think it's a process. And what's fun is when I feel like there's also a trigger that happens and it almost puts you right back into that place. And one of the things that I love is that, like, look at what you did. You landed in a foreign airport. You rented a car in a foreign country. Yes, driving manual is like riding a bike, sorta. And then you're following all these street signs and things like this to get to a place that you've never been before, ever. And you're doing it all alone. And, when people start to feel they're stuck and frustrated in their lives, and this is so hard, I'm like, look at what you've done. You've done something really hard that a lot of people would never consider doing. Mm-hmm. You can do hard things and like enjoy them even.
Yeah. And be supported in them, actually. There's helpers all along the way.
Absolutely. Well, yes, there are helpers all along the way. And so before we jumped on the call, you had asked, do I allow you to talk about anything other than solo travel? And of course you can. I would love to hear, because you mentioned that there's been some other adventures that you've had that have had some significant growth opportunities. Can you share one or two of those stories?
So there's two stories that come to mind, and there was one in Egypt, and I was with a group, and at the time when I was in Egypt, I was a bleached blonde, so I had blonde hair, and the little girls there loved to just come up and touch my hair because it was so foreign to them. But it also, you stood out in the crowd, you could see, so we were at, I think it's in Cairo, the big bazaar market, which is so big, I can't even explain how big it is. And we had gotten off our tour bus, and I was with one of the ladies I had met in the tour, and she was from Chicago, and she's actually African American. And so over there, she's considered a Nubian princess, and beautiful Black woman, and bleached blonde, right? And so we go, and we're going through the market and having our experience. And we started to get to the outer perimeters of the market. And of course, we were enjoying it because truly got to see more of the authentic life and the authentic living. But it becomes very clear that you're out of the market. Mm-hmm. And we get probably 3 or 4 blocks off the main stretch. And all of a sudden, our bus driver, ladies, no, you can't be here. He was watching us like this guardian angel because we had drawn so much attention because of just the way we looked externally, that he was following us through this market to make sure that we were safe.
Wow.
And but we're like, but we want, he goes, no, you can't, no, not safe for you to be here.
Wow.
And he's like, and so there was this aspect of this guardian angel, like, wow, like they are what your people are watching out for you. And it didn't mean that anything was going to happen because we didn't feel that at all, but still they're weighing on the line of caution, right? To make sure, because you stand out just because of how you look, you stand out.
And they don't want anything bad to happen to you in their country. That's bad for them.
Oh, at all. And what was amazing, one of the feelings I had in Egypt that was amazing is when we got off the plane, there were guards with machine guns. When you're walking through the city, there are guards on top of the towers with machine guns. When you leave the hotel at night, there is a guard hiding himself behind the tree. And at first it feels very foreign and very intrusive. Yet a week into it, I felt safer in Egypt than I ever felt in the U.S.
Wow.
Because they weren't going to let anything happen to you.
Sure.
You were being watched, and your safety was utmost priority. And I remember walking home from the hotel in our little cottages and walking, quarter mile, half mile, not far. But in the U.S., I wouldn't do that at 2 a.m. I'd have someone walk with me.
Yep.
And I felt totally secure and safe because they're watching you. And I remember going, this is the weirdest thing to feel this safe.
Yep. And
more safe there than somewhere else. And then I had a totally different experience in Peru. I was up in Lake Titicaca, and there's a temple across from the hotel that we were staying at. And so a group from the hotel, again, I was with the tour group and I had met some of the people. So we went across to the temple and we were watching and just walking through at our own pace and our own grace. I mean, totally secure, totally safe. But there were a bunch of school children playing, right? And you could tell they had been playing all day. Like they're dirty and they're just full of life. And we were at this little temple, and this little 4-year-old came up and stood next to me, and she just held my hand. She just reached up and held my hand. And I think my heart melted.
Wow.
And she took me around and showed me certain things that in the area, right? And when she was done, I gave her this big hug, and I kissed her on the cheek. And I was elated. And I remember coming back and meeting up with some of the people in the group, and one of them said to me, you should really wash your hands because she was super dirty. And I went, what? Like, this little girl was just connecting with me. Mm-hmm. It was the most magical, beautiful experience. Mm-hmm. And dirt washes away. And it was this real, like, whoa. And that's the piece I think you're talking about when people aren't open to something.
It reminds you that what you see are not the same things that other people see. And it actually, probably you learned a little bit more and you saw things even more differently once you heard how they saw it.
Yes.
That's awesome. I mean, it's interesting. You just can't predict. You can't assume. Mm-mm. Not everybody's going to experience these things in their own very natural and organic way. And we just have to be okay with that.
And language is not a barrier because so much is said with the expression and the hands and the gestures that I didn't need to speak the same language.
Right. It makes a huge difference. And like I said, you brought up that there were some really important lessons that you learned on that travel. And I would agree. I think the longer that we can take that moment and remember that these are important lessons and that they deserve a little bit of extra time to go back and reflect on, it is worth it. It makes a difference.
Yeah. I think traveling and getting out of your familiarity will change you if you let it. And I think it only changes you for the better. Absolutely. Yeah. There's so much expansion and more inclusivity that happens and understanding. And it's just like, if you let it, it will open you.
Absolutely. Well, Jeni, I can't believe that we are almost out of time for today. And I would want to make sure that everybody knows where to find you, hear a little bit more about what you do, and certainly connect with you and follow you.
Thank you for that. They can definitely find me on my website, which is jenidehn.com. And Dawn is spelled D-A-H-N.
And that will be in the show notes, so they'll know where to find you from there. Yep.
And one of the things that I'm very excited about that I'm actually going to be launching this October, so right around the corner, probably when this airs, is I'm launching a Zoom group call. And it's called Lighting the Way. And what the content of this is coming from is, I truly believe you have to know the story or know the wound or know the pattern, whatever you want to call it, before you can change or heal it. I think Brené Brown just said it the other day, and we have to acknowledge this before we can change it. And so I'm going to be going through the chakras and one by one about how they are actually developed and where that baseline program comes in. So that's on there. You can read about it. And if you choose to do that or choose to partake in that group call, then you also get free access to a private membership group that I do meditations on, teachings on, that I show up in all the time to be able to support you on your journey. That's all it comes down to. It's just, I feel we all need support.
That's awesome. Jeni, it's been such a pleasure to hear about your story. And I think we may have to do another episode in a couple of years so we can hear what the growth has been since you've embarked on your first solo travel.
I would definitely enjoy that and look forward to that. And hopefully more solo travel around the corner. It's good.
I agree.
Fantastic.
Wasn't it great to hear the stories that Jeni shared with us today? It's important to remember that when you are in tune with where you are, you can observe so many things, and travel is so expansive, but we're all being expanded in a very different way. And it's fascinating to hear how the same travel experience is different for each person. Now, if you love these stories and want to help support Go Solo Live, you can do that by making a small financial contribution to the show on patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Go Solo Live. Please show the love. We've reached the end of today's episode, but the conversation doesn't have to end there. Remember to follow us on Twitter at Go Solo Live, share, subscribe, and review the show when you get a chance. And if you're interested in being a guest, reach out to me at Jennifer@transformviatravel.com. Until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.